Thank you for being with us here on KCTV 5 Plus. Every time you get a driver's license, you give them the states or give the state DMV your personal information. But what if we told you that that personal data is being sold? We have KCTV 5 investigative reporter Samantha Boring here with us today to talk about how Kansas and Missouri are cashing in on that information. And I mean, not just there, also we're seeing this nationally too, Sammy. Tell us about the story, what we can expect today.
Well, Taylor, this is really, I think, a shocking statement for a lot of people to hear. You might not know that there is a federal law that's been allowing this for decades, and specifically it's through the Kansas and Missouri Department of Revenues, who have those divisions of motor vehicles, and they're able to sell the data that you're giving to them to either get your driver's license or your vehicle registration. Now, there is a catch, though, and you'll be able to learn that here in these stories.
All right, so what we're going to do first is show you our Investigates TV, our national team's version of the DMV data and how it affects us nationally, and then we're going to get into how it impacts us locally, and then from there, we're going to go behind the story. Here it is.
I am a mom of 6. I am a business owner and an advocate. I do balloons and event decor. It is a huge passion of mine. It's my way of bringing joy to people and like celebrations. I didn't always have that joy, right? And so I feel like it was like my outlet to bring it to others.
Sitting in front of a wispy wall of pink, in a room filled with the untapped promise of even more color, Nikki knows more than most. There's always a story bursting behind every half smile.
So, my journey is rough. I had an extremely traumatic childhood.
In adulthood, she says she's dealt with more trauma, including, she says, suspicions she's been stalked and had her devices hacked. She's reported her issues to police and believes she's sometimes been the target of a hired private investigator.
If you have resources, if you have the money to buy or hire an investigator or to buy my data, I feel like, you know, there's like a price tag on my safety, and that is devastating.
Depending on where you live, we've discovered private investigators, government agencies, car insurance companies, police, towing companies, auto dealers, and data brokers could have access to your personal information through the Department of Motor Vehicles. Your name, address, phone number, driver identification, all information you must give your state to get a driver's license or register a vehicle has been sold for millions all across this country over the last 5 years.
It's actually allowed because of a law with privacy in the name, the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, or DPPA. The federal law was passed in 1994 after the murder of actress Rebecca Schaefer. She was shot and killed at her front door by an obsessed fan who got her address from a private investigator's use of California motor vehicle records.
This law has been around for a long time now.
James Lee is the president of the Identity Theft Resource Center, a national nonprofit that helps people protect their data. He says the law doesn't keep your data from being available, it just keeps it from being publicly available.
There are reasons that you can get the information, and there are organizations that have access to the information. And in every case, states sell that information.
While the act was intended to limit access to this data, it contains 14 exemptions, including allowing sales, ironically, to private investigators, employers for background screenings, and companies for debt collection or insurance. And depending on where you live, what is sold can also vary. Lee says the law was originally designed to protect our Social Security number, which is kept private in some states.
That's not what we should be worrying about anymore. Your Social Security number's out there, sorry to tell you, but that's not what the bad guys really want. But your driver's license, now that's valuable to them.
We contacted the DMVs from all 50 states to find out how much money they make from these records. We also asked if you could opt out. who can buy this information, and what each state does with the money. As of early October, 35 states gave us hundreds of documents to sift through, some revealing for the very first time just how much money they are collecting from providing driving information to companies.
In fiscal year 2024, these 23 states collected a total of at least $282 million. Of the states that gave us records, Georgia took in the most money, more than $53 million last year, followed by California's $49 million. Indiana collected $25 million. Ohio, $20 million. Some states wouldn't tell us how much money changes hands without charging us money. Michigan said it would cost more than $81,000 to find out how much money it collects from dealing data. New York tried to charge us nearly $2,000. And Virginia told us it doesn't have any records of how much money it collects, and figuring that out would cost us up to $1,000. Many of the DMVs contend they don't sell information. They say they're allowed under the DPPA to charge a fee to cover the cost of maintaining the records. But those fees vary greatly from state to state. Some charge data buyers $5 to $10. Some states have contracts with large companies and charge thousands to pull hundreds of reports all at once. Rich Robertson is one of the people who gets access to those driving records.
I, as a private investigator, have access to this information. I am subject to audit. The Motor Vehicles Office can come in at any time and ask me why I ran that particular search. I have to have insurance. I have a contract with MVD that's that thick.
He's been a private investigator in Arizona for 25 years now. Before that, he was a journalist, and he remembers what it was like before the DPPA was passed.
Back 30, 40 years ago, anybody could walk into the MVD and get a copy of somebody's driver's license.
He says the federal law is working and that Arizona also has its own strict privacy rules. He says the state could audit him or pull his license if he abused the system. He uses DMV databases to get names, addresses, dates of birth, and driving records so he can help in prosecutions, work with victims, and protect children.
Just recently, I got a guy exonerated from a criminal charge because I was able to access motor vehicle records out of Illinois.
Robertson says people don't want their personal information out there, but at the same time, they're demanding more safety.
They want their handyman who comes to their house. They want their babysitter. They want their child care center. They want their Little League coach. They want all these people backgrounded to make sure that their children are safe. Backgrounding means digging into your private information.
Crystal Justice is a consultant at the National Domestic Violence Hotline. She's seen firsthand what can happen when data is misused in this high-tech world.
When technology is created, it can be created for good, it can be created to make our lives easier, but it can be misused by abusive partners to control, to harass, to cause harm to their victims. We call that digital abuse.
She says victims and survivors already go through painstaking efforts to make sure their private information is not shared.
We challenge companies, agencies, or organizations to think, what data are we collecting? Is this necessary? How are we sharing it? How are we selling it?
DPPA came into being at a time when we were talking about somebody walking up to a DMV office and requesting a piece of paper that had driver's information on it. Whereas now it's available instantly online from any place in the world.
Lee says despite the DPPA, privacy laws from state to state are so different, it's hard to ensure the large organizations gobbling up data are following all the rules. Under the federal law, companies are not supposed to sell the data for marketing purposes, but some consumers claim it's happened in the past. LexisNexis, which we found is the leading buyer of data in nearly every state we looked at, settled a class action lawsuit in 2021 for $5.13 million. The suit alleges LexisNexis illegally sold driver information from DMV crash reports to law firms for marketing. We also found Carfax spent millions last year buying data from DMVs. A proposed class action lawsuit filed in February claims Carfax unlawfully sold accident reports to third parties. Carfax is asking the suit to be dismissed, saying it never disclosed information from a motor vehicle record and that the DPPA doesn't limit access to crash reports.
It's really not fair for where you live to determine the rights you have. We need to have a uniform national law.
Only 3 states told us you can actually opt out from having your information shared, and only in certain situations: Delaware, Wisconsin, and Wyoming.
So we're not allowed to opt out. I'm not surprised.
For people like Nikki from Texas, the idea any personal information can be sold is more than unsettling.
I think that's something that we as victims or we as people should be able to have some control over.
She says it's a public safety issue, not a place to make money.
You need to check in on the kiosks.
It's early, you're tired, and you're in line at the DMV.
I had to be up at 5:30 this morning to get on the 6 a.m. waiting list, and then there was still a 2.5-hour wait.
An unavoidable task with an unexpected exposure.
Did you know that?
No, I had no idea.
In Kansas and Missouri,
No, I did not know that at all.
the state can sell the data you give the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Oh, wow, that is really shocking, right?
And it goes to private companies.
It's kind of an invasion.
And I know your eyebrows raised.
Yeah, how can they get away with that?
You expect privacy when getting your license or registration here, but your information, such as your name, date of birth, or address, can quietly travel further than you might think. That's thanks to a decades-old federal law.
That's the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, or DPPA. It prevents driver information from being open to the public, but there's a catch.
It's pretty strict. It says that the data can only be used for the particular purposes, such as towing, insurance, government need, etc.
It also includes access for debt collections or private investigators. Nationwide, states rake in thousands selling driver and vehicle data, including yours right here in Kansas and Missouri. Here's what we found. Public records show in 2024, the Kansas Department of Motor Vehicles made a little more than $1 million selling to 2 companies, RL Polk, an automotive data and marketing company, and Experian, one of the 3 major credit bureaus. In Missouri, data was sold to more than 5,000 organizations, including banks, law groups, and assessment offices. Missouri made just over $151,000 last year.
Seems like to me, they're selling us, I hate to say that, selling us out, but it's the truth. I mean, they're selling our stuff to other people. How's that protection?
And they aren't alone. Our national investigative team found in 2024, 23 states collected at least $282 million when selling data.
The data is valuable because it can produce a model of you that can then be exploited by companies, by governments, by bad actors.
Currently, there is nothing that Kansans or Missourians can do to opt out of this. Then there's that big question. Can this be stopped?
To know, okay, I have to do this, but then it's still like a compromising situation. It's like lose either way.
University of Kansas law professor Andrew Torrance says while there are pros and cons to people having your data, he says it's really up to the states to decide how this moves forward.
Let people opt out of giving their data, or even better, force the state or a company to have consumers opt in to providing their information.
And that choice is something we found many people want to see happen.
Give me a chance to say I want my stuff sold, which I'm not going to do that.
I want them to know that I do not like this information at all, and I am not okay with it. I'm not okay with my information out there for anybody to use for whatever reason, and they need to get in gear and protect us.
Until lawmakers act, remember this. The state requires your personal information to drive, but they're not required to keep it all private.
Kansas did not provide an interview for this story and did not respond to our questions, though Missouri did reply to our questions and shared that the state does not sell driver data but provides it to eligible entities and are reimbursed for the cost of giving that data. They tell us this has been effective since 1997. In Mission, Samantha Boring, KCTV5 investigates.
What a story there, Samantha. And, you know, one thing that really stood out is just the amount of drivers who don't know about this.
Yeah. I think, Taylor, you know, when we first started working on this story and we started speaking to people, it was kind of like a repetitive question and answer, because there's only so many questions you can ask people about this, because we don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of these contracts and those kinds of things, just because that's not the average person can understand that. But with just hearing that your data, that's how people access your data, is shocking in itself, and people have such similar reactions to all of it. Some more angry than others. I would say a lot of younger people might not be as concerned from what we were hearing just when we were out at the DMV in one day, but I think some of the older folks, you know, that is scary to know that you really don't know who might have access to those things.
Yeah, and especially in a day and age where we deal with that a lot. We see so many headlines about data breaches, you know, settlements that have to happen because people's information is compromised or found. So in your investigation, did anything come up at all for folks who may have gotten licenses in different states? Like, I'm one of those people where I haven't only lived in Missouri, but have had a license in Maryland, had a license in Indiana. Is there like a cross between that? Like the states that I lived in, would they be making money individually off of my information?
Yeah, so from our national investigative team, they did find that most states are doing this because they can under the DPPA. But as for what exactly the state is making, only some of them shared specifically how much they made in the year 2024. A lot of them will say that they're not selling data, they're providing it to the eligible entities, because under this federal law, there are specific organizations that can access this, whether that be kind of what we talked about, towing, insurance, debt collections, private investigators. But even in Missouri, they gave us a list of over 5,000 organizations, not people, but it was from cities to assessment offices to banks, law groups. It really just depends. And the nice thing about, we have it linked in our story right now on the website, Investigate TV's website. They have a longer story that's a little bit more in depth about the federal side. They actually have a map on their story where you can go and like drag your cursor over the state, and you can see specifically on a state that you might be interested in, how much they might have made or what exactly they found out from them, because they didn't get answers like we saw in their story from every state, because a lot of them, when we're requesting these records, which is a lot of what our job entails as investigative reporters, we get faced with these high bills that we have to either fight or end up paying, because sometimes it's really difficult to get those records without having to pay a lot of money.
Yeah, and in a national story, she was saying how at one point some states were charging them nearly $1,000 just to get that information. But also just the amount of money, just from, I believe it was 23 states that they got the information on, and almost $300 million.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah, it is a lot of money. And it's, you know, to us normal people every day, $1 million seems like a lot, but to these states, it's pretty small. So that was another thing that we heard from people that was really shocking, is the fact that that's so much money. What is that money going to? That's something we didn't really find out. We just know that from some of the states that have shared this information, they're saying, you know, that money is specifically used to reimburse the cost that it takes to put this data together and provide it to these entities. So that could mean like paying the people that work in that department, or the money it takes to like put these Excels together, things like that. But we don't really totally know. And I think another thing you were kind of touching on, Taylor, is like that the data breaches and the safety and all of that stuff. You know, that's not something we talked about majorly in this story because we haven't really found anything from our 2 states about has there been a data breach specifically with this information. We weren't given any info on that. But what we were able to find is like a lot of these states face, they have to audit these groups or have to go through certain forms. Like this is a very strict process that they're supposed to follow. Mm-hmm. Now, if we know they're following it, we don't know that for sure. But from the law professor I spoke with, we know that this is a very important process of keeping this data private as best they can, even though, you know, they are selling it in a sense.
And talking about the privacy element of it, toward the end of the story, we heard from one of the folks that you interviewed, and she said, you know, she hopes that there could be like that opt-out option, but it sounds like that might not even really be a possibility.
Yeah, it's not in Kansas and Missouri as far as we know. At the bottom of our web script on kctv5.com, I do have a section in there. If you live in the state of Missouri, luckily they did speak to us about if you have concerns and want to talk to someone about your information and how it's getting out there, you can send emails to either the Motor Vehicle Records Group or Driver's License Records. There's both those emails on there that they provided. And then another thing you can do, just as we do our jobs every day, is requesting public records. You can also try and request where your records are going through a public records request through the state. There's links at the bottom on how to do that through the states. Those are difficult to do. They can cost money, but it is a way that people can try and figure out, okay, where is my information gone? How much is it being sold for? What specific information? You can try and request all of those things. There's no promise that you'll get those, but that is a way that we as citizens can try and do that.
Yeah, and even going back to the reimbursement, how they were saying, I think was it Missouri that they get reimbursed, but I don't even see how that can provide any sense of ease because the data is still out there. Like how is that, you know, benefiting us at all, those of us who go and get our driver's licenses from them? The data is still out there.
Yeah, and kind of what the law professor spoke with me about, Andrew Torrance, is, you know, there are pros and cons. We might not think there are pros to people having our data. Like, say he said, for instance, like an insurance company has our data and say we have a really good profile of driving. You haven't done anything wrong in the however many years you've been driving. That can really help boost you to get that cheaper insurance rate, those kinds of things. But then again, he did talk about, you know, there are bad actors out there, unfortunately, and this data can be used against us. It's just like how we've heard when people, not saying this specifically happens, but when data has been accessed in other ways, not through this way, that's how people sometimes steal identities. Like there are those concerns, no matter how data is getting out, because, you know, what he talked about is once data is online, it is very hard to contain versus data being on paper. And that's where that extra concern comes from. And that's partially why there's those rules and those laws that say, in that federal law that says, you know, you have to be audited or they have to make sure there's this privacy in here. But really, he said the next steps would have to be from our states. They would have to have some sort of legislation in the legislatures that make it to where you can opt in or opt out. But that isn't something that we've really seen yet. We didn't really get any answers from Kansas, but from Missouri, we were just told if you have concerns, you can send those emails to those two on the website that we have right now.
And really quickly, let's talk about that federal law that allows this. I know it says that there are some restrictions there, but could you just run through it with us one more time?
Yeah, so on the federal law, the Driver Privacy Protection Act, it's specifically saying that like this data is not open to the public, but we know, as we've just seen in both of these stories, there is a catch. It's very strict, but there are private entities such as towing, insurance, governments, banks, private investigators, law enforcement that can access your data. And that can include your driver's license data, which is like your name, date of birth, your address, and then for your vehicle registration data, things like that. So, and something we talked about too is like, you know, this is something you have to do to drive. You can't just not have a license. I mean, sure you could. I don't know how smart that would be or how lucky you'd be doing that, but you do have to do these kinds of things. And so kind of like one of the women we spoke with, she said, you know, it's like a compromise and it's really a lose-lose no matter what from her perspective. And that is the hard thing with this, because this federal law has been around since, I believe, 1994. But I know in Missouri they'd started allowing this in 1997. So it's been around for decades, and not sure if it will be going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think the lady that you talk with probably has the right idea when it comes to that, because like you said, a lot of us, we need our driver's licenses, and even if we're not driving, we need a form of identification. So that's interesting. So as you were doing this investigation, what would you say maybe shocked you the most, or just something that maybe you learned that you didn't know before?
Well, I didn't know like how in-depth this law really is and how it works. I knew that there were ways that data can be sold in a sense. I think the most shocking thing for me was when we got these numbers and saw these contracts for Kansas and then the list with Missouri. It was interesting to see that like Kansas was only selling to 2 different companies. A lot of people had heard of Experian when we talked with people, because one of the major credit bureaus, it's pretty common to hear that name. But hearing RL Polk, not a lot of people know who they are. And then to know that they made just over $1 million doing that with 2. And then in Missouri, they had over 5,000 groups that they gave this data to, and they only made like 151,000 last year. So it's very surprising to see the difference in like how much they're charging for this data, how that works. It's just like you would maybe think like with Missouri giving it to so many others, they would maybe make a little bit more, but that wasn't the case there. So it was surprising to just see how those numbers played out, and how that the states just, they're so close together, but how they do things so differently.
Yeah. And the DMV causes enough stress in and of itself. We heard from the lady in the beginning of your story about how she made an appointment and still had to wait 2.5 hours. So you put this on top of it, it's just like, oh gosh, what now? But you did mention that you have a lot of things linked in your web story. This is on our website, kctv5.com. I see that there is a link to actually be able to go and read the law, the federal law there, and then you also noted the information to send emails if folks want to, share their concerns. What other useful information can people find on our website here?
I think also it's under the, it's under the section that says federal law allows data sales with restrictions. It's just a little further down. It has our Investigate TV link. It's right above the photo, a little further down, I think. But it goes to our Investigate TV article, and props to them. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do this story without their work too, because they did a ton of work on this, doing the records requests. And they have this little tool that you can look through and see what states did and did not provide information to them, and then just where exactly they went with like their fees and recovering to maintenance costs. Those, like, they just did so much work on this that made this story possible. So shout out to them for that, but definitely go read their story as well to learn even more.
Yeah, and also shout out to you for, bringing it to our area. I'm sure this is something that a lot of people did not know about, as we saw in your story. So it's really bringing light to something that people should definitely be aware of.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for being up here with us today and taking us behind the story. We will look forward to your next one. And with that, we will be right back.